Thanks for tuning in to the Women's Vibrancy Code, a podcast dedicated to helping women move from exhausted to energized, balance their hormones, and feeling turned on by their life, their lover, and themselves. I'm your host, Maraya Brown. I'm a Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, keynote speaker, and self-made entrepreneur. I'm the founder of my signature program, the Women's Vibrancy Code. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about your energy, hormones, libido, and embracing your feminine power. Oh, and you might want to have pen and paper to take some notes on some of these episodes. Amy Van Slambrook is a licensed psychotherapist and certified leadership and relationship coach. She helps high-profile women and couple CEOs, entrepreneurs, and leaders to reclaim and elevate into the most aligned and powerful version of themselves in their business, relationship, and life by doing deep healing and transformation at the soul, mind, and body levels. I imagine it's also spirit. I know that you're a very spirit-led woman. With 30 years of professional experience in psychotherapy, coaching, executive leadership, genetic and psychological research, functional medicine, and entrepreneurship. Wow. As well as her own 35-year personal journey of trauma healing and personal development. Amy brings vast experience to her work in post-traumatic growth and holistic wellness and empowerment. She is sought after speaker, podcast guest, and host. You host your own podcast? I didn't know that.
I do. It's just launching. So yes. I'm so excited. So
what's it called?
We'll be talking. It's called Elevated Conversations. And so I will be connecting with you because we have nothing short of elevated conversations, Maraya.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you listening in the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast, obviously you're in the podcast world. So stay tuned to Elevated Conversations by Amy Van Slambrook. She's also a published author. And Amy builds her life and work on a strong foundation of faith. So Amy, lovely to finally have you here. For those of you watching live in the Facebook world, welcome. You're welcome to ask any questions there. And I'll try to do my best to tag Amy to have her respond to whatever questions might come up. Okay, so we already had a nice, juicy conversation off camera, which... You know, I think just to continue that, and then let's get into, this is already the interview and it's happening exactly as it needs to happen. We were talking about as individuals, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as women, and for me as a mother and a wife, and Amy, your version of whatever those quote unquote titles might look like, when we're in our own chapter of churning, of mourning, of in maybe feeling triggered, or, you know, the barriers show up, the moments of who am I, the moments of feeling energetically off and trying to sift through, where is this all coming from? Do you have any thoughts on that from the perspective of, you know, all of your expertise?
Yes. Well, I have lots because I've been blessed with a journey that has been full of churning of my own and self-examination and challenges that took the form of traumas that were actually extraordinary opportunities. And so one of the things that you and I were talking about, Maraya, is the power of our own experiences to transform the journeys of other people through that connection and appreciation and that validation of our collective experiences. You know, anytime I have gone through anything, sometimes I go through these moments of confusion. You know, why is this taking so long? What is this about? This doesn't seem logical. And, you know, for me, my conversations with God are active and all the time. And so that's how I will refer to that part of my life, whatever that is for you in your life. But as I've asked God, what is this about? You know, I've never been a why me person. I've always said, why not me? Because that's just how I am. And I've always been taught that anything we go through is serving a larger purpose. And so as I've gone through those things, I've asked God to show me, what is this about? And he has said, often using our own language, being real and vulnerable to safe audiences about what we're going through is often the greatest form of connection and validation, because we don't know who and who isn't going through a similar experience. But often our very words are exactly what they need to hear to validate what they're struggling with as well. Mm-hmm. Trauma cuts off the blood flow to the language center of the brain. And for all of life, until you do deep work, from everything the research shows, that connection stays a bit impaired. And so oftentimes articulating our feelings, articulating our experiences and exactly what we're going through can be very challenging. So a lot of times I work with women who are very powerful leaders to actually reconnect and find their words, if you will, which is often something we say to little ones, but that's something that we get to do as well. So that's why this is also so tremendously healing in trauma, is that simply being given the words that you may have wanted to speak is a freeing experience.
So what I'm hearing is there can be very ambitious, high achieving women who we might think have it all going on and have it all together. And inevitably inside that inner child is still really searching for the words and searching for the validation. And as we as individuals experience our own version of it and show up in safe containers with a great deal of vulnerability and speak words to the experience, those that we serve hear it and internalize it and feel heard and seen, and it gives them the words. And so are you saying that as an example, if I'm sharing something vulnerable and I'm putting words to my experience, it then helps a woman who is searching for the words, and that trauma has disconnected that part of the brain. Does that then help the rewiring and the reconnections to actually place the words? It's almost like a gift. Like I'm having the visual of a gift with a beautiful red bow. Like here are some words that you might be looking for. And does that help in the reconnection of those brain synapses?
100%. And in fact, even if they aren't exactly the right words, that will become clear as well. Like, well, it's not exactly it, but it's this. And so either way, they're gaining a lot more clarity into their own experience. And certainly I am not an advocate for just, lots and lots of vulnerability without really being careful about who you are being vulnerable with.
Yep.
We don't share our story to everybody because not everybody deserves to hold your story. But those you really feel called to share your story with will definitely be welcome recipients of it.
And I mean, I'm a big fan of Maraya Brown. I know she says the same thing, but it's not true vulnerability. I can post some post on my Facebook feed that goes out to anyone and everybody. True vulnerability is when we find those intimate people that really know us and see us.
Yes.
And we show ourselves there.
Yes.
Yeah. So as we both work with the driven women, the trailblazers, the game changers, to create that safe container for them to put words to their experience and feel safe and show the vulnerability that we're not, I'll be the first to admit I'm far from perfect. And there's all sorts of things that I long for and churn with. And I'm sure, Amy, you can relate. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what is trauma?
Well, there are about as many definitions of it as there are different experiences with it, but the definition that lands most universally for me is just, it is any interruption in your emotional experience such that you feel more vulnerable or violated as a result of it. It forever alters the way you experience life. And trauma can be a big T trauma. We call them big T and little t traumas. And that really is determined largely, I believe, by the person experiencing it. So a big T trauma can be physical or sexual abuse, emotional abuse, depending on how much it interrupted your emotional experience and feelings of safety and security in your world. That really determines the degree to which you are on that scale, if you will. And I don't like to compare experiences, but that's a bit of an easy way to categorize it. Small T traumas can happen with a move. If you've sold a home and you had lots of memories there, and that it's triggering when you might have to move and start in a new space and establish new connections there. What we went through collectively, culturally during the pandemic and afterwards is a major trauma. Our whole experience day to day was interrupted, and that, allowed anybody who may not have had trauma, and those people are rare, those who did experience what many of us have experienced all throughout our lives, and those who'd been through chronic trauma, really, we're like the ER physicians and nurses, we're very comfortable in managing the craziness and the mayhem. And in odd ways, it can be soothing to our nervous system because we know it so well.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's for the space holders.
Yes.
Exactly. So I'm hearing a couple things. It's not just about the event itself, whether it's a big T or a little t, but more how it's received and how it's filtered through the individual. Yeah. And some people have much more resiliency or almost are born or created or cultivated to diffuse it. And it almost serves them because it's such a familiar space. Yeah. That's fascinating. But it's almost like self-deprecating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For you in particular, I mean, you support women specifically through trauma. And so what I'm hearing is it might be a really familiar. Is it almost a safe space for you to be diffusing others' trauma on a regular basis?
It's a known space. I will say that. And it's been a journey. Part of that is me understanding if I am going through a particularly difficult time, managing my boundaries with that. And as a therapist, I learn to close the door when I'm done with sessions. It would be really, really, not only unethical, but it actually robs my clients of their experience if I take on it myself. If I take that on and I'm a high empath and sensitive person, so I'm in it with my clients in a very deep and powerful way that's hard to describe often, but I literally I see things and am given a vision for things. And that's a powerful thing. But I've also learned in order to manage my health, I close the door and I give them the privilege of being alone in their experience with it after our time is done. Right. I'm always there for support. But when we rescue people, when we try to take on their experience too much, we also starve them of the benefit of going through the churning, of going through the wrestling. And that's really where the largest degree of empowerment is built. Mm-hmm. When they learn to come home to themselves, when they learn to pay attention to their inner child and their inner wisdom, it's reconnecting that personal integrity because trauma robs that really powerful force.
Yeah. It reminds me when my first job as a nurse practitioner, when I first finished at Yale, was at a federally funded clinic.
Wow.
And, I had received a full ride scholarship, which is a federal scholarship, and I had to repay it with 2 years of my time with some of the most disenfranchised patient population, homeless, on drugs, really in difficult scenarios, and just holding space for 10 hours a day for women that were really in a hard spot.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out how to help them along their health journey and their pregnancy journey and their women's health and their menopause. And I would come home and remember noticing how exhausted I was at the end of the day. And I had to go, all right, there has to be this very clear, definitive, I am here to support you. And I'm also not taking it on.
Yeah.
for their sake, for my sake, and also for the sake of the next patient that I would see.
Yes.
And so I developed, like, in each patient room, I had a bell at the top. So then when I'd open and close the door, the bell would ring and it would remind me. And I would close the door and take a breath and just leave that there, because I'm not going to take in their story and their trauma and their disasters in their health over into the next room, when maybe I'm seeing one woman who's just got diagnosed with cervical cancer. And then the next woman is beautiful and pregnant and her just entering her second trimester. So I imagine for all of us to be able to go, I'm here for myself. I'm here for the people that I serve, my friends, my community, my coworkers, my children, whoever, my clients, whoever it may be. And I'm not taking it on. At the end of the day, it is their responsibility, for the sake of what did I allow them to be in it?
Yes.
Allow myself not to take it on, and also protect the next client that we're seeing.
Yes.
How do you see, when it comes to the clients that you're seeing that are really in it, processing their trauma, how do you see it impact their health, their mood, their sleep, their relationships? Can we talk through that lens of health for a little bit?
Yes, 100%. Because the women who come to me are typically women who may not think, wow, I need to process my trauma. You know, they're experiencing an inability to get to the next level, or they feel like their personal relationships are not where they want them to be, or they're falling apart. They feel disconnected emotionally from their day-to-day experience, or they are having a host of physical challenges like adrenal fatigue, migraines, hormonal issues, HPA axis disorder, which I know you know a lot about. Dealing with digestive issues, feeling fatigued, all of those things, and anxiety, you know, and while the women I work with can appreciate that they have trauma in their life, we don't really realize how powerfully it's impacting us, often because it feels weak. You know, that's in the past. I've dealt with that, right? That's often, I don't want to go there again. It's going to take me off my game. I'm going to lose momentum. My business is going to suffer. Those are all things that I hear as a rationale. I just need to pay attention to whatever that surface level is. Well, I know that you and I are both called to not just deal in the surface level solutions that may provide a nice, cozy relief for a short amount of time, but they do not provide relief long term. And so when I see a woman, you know, saying, you know, I had a wake up call because I got my labs back.
Right.
And I realized the level of stress I was in, you know, and they're using terms that are not common, you know, about HPA access. My doctor told me, you know, and I think, okay, this is all connected, and the vagus nerve is a big part of that. And that's another conversation for another day, but that's significantly impacted at the moment of trauma. And so that's how women often come to me, are the symptoms that they're wanting to manage, and sensing, you know, there's something more, like I just can't break out of this current level that I'm in, or I don't even know how to have a personal life because I feel so numb, you know, and I'm tired of feeling numb. I'm tired of feeling like my relationships are not working. Mm-hmm. And so we dive into that and slowly unweave the tightly woven protection over their trauma.
Oh, so good. So HPA axis, for those of you that are wondering, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So many of the symptoms that she's referring to, the fatigue, the insomnia, the irritability, the tired, the anxiety, the sadness, digestive challenges, hair, skin, and nails, can't lose weight, can't put on weight, anxious, can't live on caffeine. All of that stuff is HPA axis. And the beauty, I love that you bring that up, because the pituitary and the adrenals, we can directly impact with nutrition, lifestyle change, supplementation. You know, that's one of my specialties. But the hypothalamus is that place where old trauma is stored. And so when I go back, you know, you're saying it's a moment where there was an experience of violation. Mm-hmm. And the more we push down those emotions and don't actually allow them to be expressed and be seen, we can have the most spectacular nutrition and all the supplements and all the testing. But those three, the HPA, they are a very tight knit team. Mm-hmm. They cannot function without all three. And so that's where this idea of trauma and really addressing it comes in.
Yes. Yes.
And so thank you for highlighting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it has been my lived journey, and I say that's the best. I know it deeply because when I had a scan, a SPECT scan, and they were looking at all of my labs and everything else, they said, your hypothalamic, your HPA axis is frozen, and then you tease apart what that means, and there's no way to get around the fact that it probably started at a moment of trauma. And that's what my body did to cope with it. Yeah. So all of my stellar nutrition and daily workouts and all of the things would only go so far.
Right. So for the women, they're saying, why can't I get pregnant? Why am I not ovulating? Yeah. Why is my thyroid crashing? Why am I so anxious? We have to go back to that HPA axis. So from the concept of breaking through, if we get into some solutions, what is the most effective way to truly break through those deep areas of really unhealed pain?
Well, the first is to honor yourself for recognizing that there are areas that need healing, that get to be healed, because when there is shame connected with it or any kind of apology, there's an immediate minimization and almost a re-traumatizing of it. It takes a lot of power to come forward with vulnerability and say, I can't do this alone. I am not handling this in a healthy way because it keeps coming up and keeps coming up. And when you keep doing the same solution and getting the same results, that isn't a marker of wisdom, as Einstein has so powerfully reminded us, that is, we cannot keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. Otherwise, that's a mark of a lack of wisdom, shall I say. And yet we try that as, if I just try a little harder. So my first admonition is to really stop the noise and be in the silence of your life and start to listen to what's happening. Because the silence of our life is never something that will lie to us. Mm-hmm. That's where we find what's really happening. And it can be scary. It can be very uncomfortable and often is for good reason. And when you listen in and when you're aware of your pain, then it's really honoring that you can't do the deep, deep work by yourself. There are some healing things that you can do. I believe in sound frequency healing, and I wrote a great inner child program on a healing app that is very powerful. That can help literally rewire some of those neurotransmitters. It soothes your central nervous system. And by doing so, you're also soothing that inner child. They're very much intertwined. Also really taking the step to honor that the investment that you make in your mental health and your emotional health and your spiritual health and your physical health is actually never a luxury. That's a necessity. And I think those are some fundamental first steps that are necessary. I think there's also paying attention to some of those basic things like, are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you tired? And when we equip ourselves, then we're better able to connect within that inner wisdom, but when we're operating on fumes, we can't expect ourselves to get a good result.
And I am so appreciative that you brought that in specifically, because when I think of trauma in the root area, our pelvic region, there's often, and let's call a spade a spade. Statistically, they say 60% of women have some history of sexual abuse. My guess is it's higher. Mm-hmm. And what I often see a pattern of is women will there's like the block in the cues of I'm thirsty, the cues of I'm hungry, there is a disconnect. And I think it really does come back to trauma, specifically in that area of the body where they forget to eat, or they overeat, and the relationship with eating and hydration feel like they get impacted. Do you feel like you've seen that?
Oh, 1,000%, 1,000%. And even retraining that is a hard task. It's just, we go for visual and tactile cues to help trip that autopilot response so that our body, even kinesthetic things, a bracelet, a necklace, when we attach a message to it, can give a powerful behavior changing impact. If you are someone who numbs and you can go like 12 hours, haven't had a bio break, haven't had anything to eat, and I'm going strong, because our brains emit chemicals to help us survive. It isn't a healthy thing. For many, it's adrenaline, and things that we override to try to keep going, but it doesn't provide for longevity, and it's certainly not healing, and it's not allowing a quality of life. And I think, the first step in my own trauma, because I never would have guessed that I had trauma. I didn't grow up thinking, oh, I have trauma. It was when I almost passed away from an eating disorder. I was working my corporate job, doing all the things, and I got on the scale and realized I weighed what I did when I was 9. And it wasn't a vanity thing. It was, hey, I've got things to do. And I was numb to my life and to my experience. And then a very skilled therapist was uncovering, hey, all these patterns where you've overworked, where you've burnt out, where you've had relationships that have really been unhealthy and violating and abusive, where you've had health issues, all of those things that bundle together is the language of your trauma trying to be healed. And I'm like, trauma, that's something other people have. Mine wasn't that bad. That's what every person says. Mine wasn't that bad. There will always be someone who had a worse experience. That doesn't take away the validity of your own. And that's when I started to really connect all of these experiences to my felt experience and to my body that for years had been crying out, but we didn't, this was the early 80s and late 80s and early 90s. We didn't know, and now we know so much more.
There's one word that you said that really jumped out at me, and that's the concept of longevity.
Yeah.
I feel like we live in this world where, I don't know about you, but women are coming to me. They're wanting to address the stress, the burnout, the exhaustion, the hormones, the perimenopause, the menopause. And many are accustomed to quick fixes.
Yes.
I have a headache. I take an ibuprofen. It's gone. Can't you just give me the next pill? And so I imagine, and sometimes, yes, there can be quick fixes just to limit the symptoms for now. Mm-hmm. But for me, I go, and we also get to look underneath the hood. Yes. We get to go, well, why are these symptoms popping up in the first place? Why is this happening in your life? And so I'm guessing that you might also, I don't know, do you feel like in your world that there's this initial propensity to just go for surface level solutions that are going to give quick fixes, but really fail to help the long-term game? And how do you navigate that in the way that you support your clients?
Right. 100%. This is one of those things that I could spend hours talking about, because our culture is very, we love speed. I call it hydroplaning through life. We want the next fix. We want the next.
Although hydroplaning is not easy.
Right. No, it isn't easy, but it's fast. Right. And we get a rush out of that when we're going quickly. You're right. It isn't easy. But it feels like it'll get us from here to there more quickly. Right. Rather than taking this long road of the topography, if we continue that metaphor, and really understanding and being in our own worlds. Mm-hmm. And quick fixes can provide relief in much the same way eating a bag of any sugary candy can. It'll make you feel good for a little while, and you'll feel like you satiated your hunger. And then pretty soon you will bottom out and you will crash more deeply than you did before you had the sugar.
Yep.
And so that's really the value of doing the deep work. And I tell women who are concerned, I can't be off my game. What if I can't function in my business? What if I can't take care of my children and my marriage? And, there are so many what ifs. What if I lose my edge? That's a big one, because we think that angry edge is so essential to wherever we're driven to and whatever we're trying to accomplish. And yet what God has shown me so many times is that hate is never the way to change and transformation. Love is the only powerful way forward. And so is a deep, deep, foundational solution that addresses things at the root. The problem is, even women who are offering that in all of their good-heartedness, if someone has not gone through the rigor of honoring the sacredness of your soul, that they have trained themselves, that they have the certification and the training and the experience to handle whatever comes up with your trauma, they do not deserve to hold your soul. Maraya did not get to the level that you've gotten to, Maraya, by going to a weekend course. This was a devotion of years of investment of your own time, your own life, your own study. And I have had the blessing of doing the same thing. And that's something that I really want to caution people about. Yes, mindset coaches and spiritual coaches can take you to a certain level, but people don't know what they don't know. And there are literally legal implications of those who take on trauma, who are not skilled, who do not have the documented formal training and experience, because all kinds of things can come up that people are not aware of. And so that's another word of caution, because they can offer what seems like a really alluring solution. Well, this person can help me in 12 days and it'll be great. And the problem is that they don't know how to hold your soul, and they don't know that they don't know how to hold your soul. And oftentimes it isn't necessarily the length of time, but it is about the surrender in our process. So I go deep, and I go deep very quickly, because that is the most loving thing, but it's never something that feels invasive. Your soul is the best guide to your journey. And it feels a little bit, it's a little bit disconcerting because we pay attention to where your soul is leading, but that there's a whole method to my process that's really about addressing things way down at the source, way down at the root. And that's where we can have deep healing.
Let's talk a little bit about your methodology and philosophy, because I agree, especially since the pandemic, there's so many people that are popping up online and new experts and new coaches. And yes, I invested heavily for a 3-year master's degree at Yale. And I do my continued medical education every year. I've been attending births for now 20 years and running the women's health for 17. I don't take that lightly. And I am a constant student. I will never say that I am the expert or I've arrived, because there's always more. And I have my own personal journey to be working through, not, obviously from trauma and mindset and nutrition. And, I'm a year older and my children are a new age and my sleep is changing and my sexuality and my relationship, like we're ever evolving beings. And I remember hearing you say, didn't you study with the Body Keeps the Score, Baron von der
Kolk.
That's a big deal. I imagine. I mean, you really, just reading your bio, holy macaroni. And so you've studied with some of the best. Would you talk a little bit about your methodology, your philosophy, and also how do you serve your clients? Is it all one-on-one? Is it a group setting for the people that are leaning in and saying, wow, maybe you're right. Maybe I do actually need to address these underlying emotions and moments where I've actually felt violated through my own lens. And no matter what it was, that's the big thing I'm hearing you say. It's not about the actual event. It's how you filtered and received the event. So what are your methodologies and philosophy?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Maraya. Well, and I honor the excellence with which you prepared yourself. That is it is such a beautiful gift, I think, that you give every one of your patients and your clients. And that's how I feel. Wasn't that I had this nice plan for the next 30 years of my life. It's how my journey evolved, that I worked with some of these extraordinary individuals and trained with them. And I had that hunger, and I hope I don't think it'll ever go away. I don't really think it'll ever go away. And so, I also learned from going through the work myself. I won't recommend or do anything with my clients that I have not put myself through, short of pharmaceuticals. That is where I draw the line. And I'm sure Maraya would validate that. Do not take their pharmaceuticals. But I have been through so much deep work, and I continue to go through deep work because that's how I stay prepared. So we first get a real picture of what the world looks like, both externally and internally, because that's essential. We provide an environment for our souls on the inside. And oftentimes, usually, actually, we are completely disconnected and unaware of what is running through our minds and our spirits day to day. It's how we've survived, right? We just go, and that my drill sergeant was a powerful, noisy, very, very anger-driven individual in my head. And when, my therapist asked me to listen, I said, well, I don't hear anything. I don't really hear anything. And she said, keep listening. And you can't unhear what you hear. And so we really establish, okay, let's get you connected to your experience of now. And then we take that down a layer deeper into some of the memories that fed that. Whose voice is it that you're hearing in your head? When did you first hear that voice? What did it mean to you? And how is that person still present in your life? Mm-hmm. And we slowly peel back the layers and untie the mosaic, if you will, to really understand how everything filtered together. And then when I go through deep inner child work, and this is something that really only trained professionals should do, as much as inner child work is wonderful, there can be moments of dissociation. And that isn't to scare people to think that they're psychiatrically diagnosable, but it is a way that the psyche copes with emotionally experiences that are overwhelming. And so we can disconnect. We can feel like, whoa, I'm backing out of the room. Or you can feel like you're constantly observing yourself from the third person, and you're overanalyzing, self-doubt, all kinds of things. And so we really navigate, okay, what was that moment, when that happened? And what was the language of that little one? And it's a really deep process that we go through. And usually, and this is something that I am so thankful for, that God has given me a gift to be able to often see into that moment and help with the words to articulate. And then we bring in, we reparent. That's the process. We teach reparenting, so that the voice of that inner child is driving everything and is trying to help you survive. And the voice of the reparenting, which is that wise self inside of you, then heals that little one. You are worthy, you are loved, and you are safe. Usually very basic things, but whatever it is, it'll hit at the soul level. And so we drive our way down, and then we bubble up. All right, how is that showing up still? Where are the patterns? And it can be in marriage, it can be in team, it can be in business, it can be with clients as well. So that's a very quick explanation of it.
There's two things that jumped out at me. Number one was starting with getting quiet.
Yeah.
To what I heard was, you were asked, well, what are the feelings? What are the voices? And there was nothing. And I imagine for many people, Either you were too busy to hear that,
Yeah.
or it's so true, because especially today, I mean, the bombardment of social media and emails and text messages and all the things to do, and the TV playing in the background, and the podcast that we're listening to, and the people that we're caring for, and the businesses that we're wanting to grow, and the things that we're, do we actually allow a moment to say, I just had a conversation today. I had someone reach out to me about a business possibility. And I just said, no, I'm in a chapter right now for November and December where I'm really allowing myself to get quiet. And I'm going to allow some space to slow down in order to speed up.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, Amy, I've felt like I've been drinking through a fire hose, and my business has grown so much and exploded. And I've been supporting so many women and just like dealing with the thing in front of me. Yes, I meditate. Yes, I have a strong connection with my spirit, my creator, my intuition, and holy macaroni, to say, I'm going to quiet down and then find someone that is there to hold me in the journey of being able to feel worthy and loved and safe, and someone who's trained to be able to do that with skill and help us each individually hear our inner voice.
Yeah.
Because I think it really does come in a whisper often, and it requires, I don't know, you tell me. The story I tell myself is it requires quiet consistently over time.
Yes, I say it whispers and then it becomes a roar, you know, and that's how it has been for me. And I get to keep having this experience, you know, where I will take, and this sounds like a very big deal to any of you who are business owners, I realize, where I literally took a week of retreat and was primarily in silence or in soothing music or sitting by the lake and journaling and pouring out and listening. And it is, you know, it isn't like, oh, put your feet up and get a massage every day. It can be a wrestling, beautiful experience that's so healing. But even in pockets, retreats throughout your day, that moment of healing can never be substituted. You know, yes, there great value in group experiences. And I do both. I do deep individual one-on-one work. And then I work with women and their teams, their top leaders, to help them as a team utilize this wisdom and this healing, because it affects our businesses. And then I do group, a very select group that's, you know, more focused on, you know, their spirit and their soul and putting it all in context together and fueling each other's journeys and developing those connections, versus a support group for trauma. That isn't, you know, these are women at the high 6, 7, and 8 figure level. And there's a different level of leadership and challenge that comes with that. And I feel so blessed to be doing the work I do some work with couples, not as much any longer, but it's always a tertiary part of the work that I do with female CEO entrepreneurs in our one-on-one work if they are in a relationship. So yeah, I agree. And I'm learning with every year. I just turned 50. It is the most fantastic year yet. I can say that with honesty. And it has been that way because of some of the deep, deep work I've gone through myself. Yeah.
And I'm aware of time. I know we just have a couple minutes left, but I'm hearing loud and clear that for both of us, we're hungry to work with driven women and to say, yes, you get to listen in, and please don't do it by yourself.
Yes.
There are tremendous resources to support you both in an individual one-on-one setting as well as group settings, and find someone who is trained with experience and a track record that can be there to support your journey.
Yeah.
And all of in the show notes and in the description in the Facebook world, you'll see her website and social media handles and all of the relevant ways to reach out to her. Amy, any last parting words and anything specifically any place where you prefer women to go to as a starting place if they're leaning into your work?
Right. Well, Instagram is my happy place. I am the one in my DMs. So if you are someone that just wants to reach out, that's one of the best places to connect with me. But also on my website, I have free resources there. I have connections to, podcasts that I've been on. This one will be on there. And that's a way to plug into content that I really love to pour into anybody who is on my list. And that comes out several times a week. And those are the primary places to connect with me. What I'd say, and my heart's admonition to each of you is, don't put it off and don't try to do it alone. There are two women in front of you right now who have really given our lives in large degree to the calling that's on our heart, that are ready to welcome you in. And there is never an amount of shame that comes with that. There's honor and there's love and appreciation. And both of our shoulders are broad enough to be able to hold you, because I know one thing about the women we serve, Maraya, they are the ones constantly pouring into others. They are leading others. And they need to be held and led and poured into. And that's one of my biggest blessings in life, is to be able to be that for so many women and to really be that sacred space for them.
Mm-hmm. And what I heard you say is we all need help.
Yeah.
And there is no shame and there is no need for apology when we raise our hands and say, I am serving and I'm serving many and I'm pouring into many.
Yeah.
And I also am looking to be poured into and some support in my own self-reflection. So
yes.
Amy, so good. I think that we could talk forever. And
I feel that way.
Aware of time. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show today. I know you have lots of choices and live a very productive life, as we all do. I appreciate that you've allowed me to dive deep in your journey of feeling turned on by your life, your lover, and yourself. I trust you learned something, expanded your self-reflection, and you're grateful we shared this time together. Connect with me at www.thewomensvibrancycode.com or on all social media platforms and YouTube by searching for Maraya Brown, Maraya Brown. Lastly, if you've found value in what we chatted about in this episode, please consider leaving me a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. It helps others discover the podcast and get a feeling for the wonderful community we've all created together. As for now, I'm Maraya Brown, and you've been listening to the Women's Vibrancy Code.